All right. Okay, I hope I'm doing this right. Let me go on to Facebook on my computer. Peace. Okay, so I need to know if I'm live because this is my first time doing it on this phone. Welcome to my Facebook live takeover. Mata Mia, shout out. Let me log in and make sure that y'all can see me. Let's see. Hopefully I won't have any challenges with it since I'm logged in two spaces. All right. Yay. Okay. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So welcome to the Facebook Live event. I'm so happy to share this message and this opportunity for us to look at ways to live with the children that we love without being in these coercive, oppressive relationships. I'm Akilah S. Richards, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk all about unschooling and the broader umbrella of self-directed education and why it's working for my family and why I think particularly as a Black family, it's such a liberatory practice. All right. So, bear with me because I'm going to keep on. Yay. Okay. I see that it's on. And let's see. Want to know who's watching? Swipe left to see your viewers. Okay. Let me do that. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so first I'll just give you a little bit. I won't give you too much of a background in terms of how we got started because Antonia, shout out to Antonia of Mata Mia, did 2 posts recently. Yesterday they were published that gives you just a little bit of insight into how our family got started. So please take a look at that after this so that you can get some broader context. But I'm a mother. My daughters are Marley, who's 13, and Sage Nyambi, who's 11. And my husband, Chris, and I have been unschooling with Marley and Sage for almost 7 years now. And for us, it's really been about just getting to know our daughters as people and not just as students, not just as potentially successful, whatever the hells, but as people, getting to know Marley and Sage and then just recognizing who they are, what they're into, and how we can support them. So I know that's something that is going to resonate with a lot of parents, of course, right? The basics. Who is this person? How can I help them to confidently own themselves? Something I've come to start calling confident autonomy. So unschooling for us has really led to clarity on how to continue to learn Marley and Sage and how to support them without using a lot of these same oppressive tactics that have been used to oppress essentially non-white people, particularly in the US and the Caribbean, for years, many years, generations upon generations. So I have some notes over here on the side because some questions came in and I'm so happy about that. So I want to make sure that I get everybody's questions in. And if you want to learn more about my work and also how you can support your own self-directed education journey, go over to AkilahSRichards.com. All right. Okay, good. I see some viewers. Peace, y'all. Thank you so much for watching live. Tag a friend who is interested in unschooling or self-directed education right there in the comments. Go ahead and tag somebody. So, let's see. Where do I want to start? Let me give you a bit of an overview, and I'm actually just going to read this short paragraph, something that I've refined over the years, because, of course, the basic question is like, what is unschooling? You know, what is this thing? Is it like random kids, wherever they are, talking to their mamas all kind of way? Or is it like homeschooling, but just with less structure, that sort of thing? So let me give you sort of the overview, and then I'm going to go right into the questions. Okay. So, unschooling is a practice that is learning-centered and learner-centered. So I'm going to read right from this thing. When I say learning-centered, I mean that it focuses on how each child learns instead of what to teach children, or instead of what adults believe children should be learning. It looks at a child's approach to the world through his or her interactions with people in their life and also through their interactions with things, toys, animals, TV, radio, the computer, all of that. So because unschooling is learning-centered, parents spend a lot of time observing their child. A lot of it is observation and getting to understand how they navigate the world around them and how they approach things. right? So a lot of it is just getting to know how that child is showing up. So it's learner-centered also, because all those observations, we put that into practice by facilitating learning. And the way that we do that is we offer resources for that child to pursue. And we'll talk a little bit about, how that looks in the day-to-day structure. So let's get into the questions. Hey, more people hopping on. On my phone, I can't see I can't see your names or anything like that. Maybe I can see it on Facebook on my computer. Let's see. Thank y'all for bearing with my learning curve. Let's see. Want to make sure. Okay, good. Yay. Okay, wonderful. Yes, and I see y'all tagging folks. Hey, Shanae. Hey, Candace. Hey, Zakia. Thank y'all for tagging folks. All right, so the first question is, let's see. So one is from Atari, and Atari says, do you collaborate with local groups of unschoolers or homeschoolers, or do you lone wolf it? That's a very good question. All of the above, Atari, all of the above, because it just depends. It depends on what we're getting into that day. We first started out, it was very much lone wolf at first, because Marley and Sage were in traditional public school for maybe about 2 years. And then we stopped, and then we moved to Jamaica for a bit and just started observing. We started out homeschooling because we couldn't wrap our minds around the idea that Marley and Sage could learn without us telling them what to learn, or without some, sensible adult telling them what to learn. So we started out homeschooling. And then we realized that a lot of what we were doing was kind of like posturing. We were giving them like just in case busy work through a virtual academy. They were at I think it was called the Georgia Virtual Academy. We were giving them all of these things, but it felt like busy work. It seemed like they were just trying to rush through that to get to what they wanted to do. And then Marley, our oldest, she just resisted it. Like, we were literally taking them to the beach because we understood that there were other ways you could learn. But then we'd have the textbook and be like, okay, spend the first 15 minutes looking at your whatever textbook it is, and the rest of the time you can play. And, after a very short while, Marley was like, I'm not doing it. And so after all of the back and forthing, Chris and I we surrendered. We surrendered to that and said, well, okay, let's like really observe. Let's see what happens. So now, Atari, it looks sometimes like the girls being at home in their room, like a typical teen or preteen, doing their thing. And then other times it looks like us going out to communities, whether it's a homeschooling co-op. When we were here last year, we did a couple of things with Kid Cultivators homeschooling community, which Leslie Bray here in Atlanta, along with Taiwan Owens, I think is her last name, they co-facilitate that space. And it's a beautiful space because it has traditional homeschoolers who use a curriculum. And then you also have eclectic homeschoolers who use a variety of resources. And then you have unschoolers and radical unschoolers who, like our family, use no curriculum at all. And it's really learner-centered. So if we introduce some aspect of curricula, it is initiated by one of our daughters. And then when they don't want to do it anymore, then they don't have to do it anymore, because learning doesn't happen inside a curricula. Learning happens up here. So that's what we do, Atari. And also now, Marley and Sage are actually at what I like to call an unschooling school, which is an agile learning center. There are many of those, and I'm going to list some resources. I'll go back after this and just put some links to some resources, because agile learning, that movement is really very much this unschool type of self-directed space, right? So to back up a little bit, or maybe offer some clarity, unschooling is one form of self-directed education. So self-directed education is anything that is non-coercive, child-centered, not always child-led, because you can always bring in other resources. Inevitably you will. But self-directed education can look like unschooling, which is what we do. It can also look like an agile learning center. We also do that. It can look like a democratic school. It can look like a Sudbury school. It can look like a maker space where people go to whenever they want and there's no attendance, and they, collaborate together and self-organize and have projects that emerge from just their collective interest and exploration. All of those things are self-directed education. And I get so excited about that because we we are always looking at learning, I think, from this lens of something being given to us instead of something that is participatory, right? It's an all-encompassing space where learning and teaching and growing is happening simultaneously, as opposed to somebody giving you something and then you proving that you remember it in that moment, and then graduating from college and realizing that that's when your life actually starts. So I hope that answers your question, Atari. And in terms of how we structure our day, it's just kind of what I said before. It depends. I don't wake up with this specific idea of what Marley and Sage should be learning today. There are things that we share with them, Chris and I, or other members of our community, because we believe that the whole village is helping us to raise free people. I got to show y'all my Raising Free People shirt. It takes that whole village. So it just depends. Marley is very goal-centered. That's just her way. So she likes to have charts, and she likes to know that she's going to accomplish these things at this time, and that by the end of the week, she should be able to do this thing better or connect with these people. That's just her way. Sage is more like me. She may do that for some things, but by and large, she feels through the things that are of interest to her. And then she develops relationships and projects and growth based on those natural interests, and that this sort of like the organic flow of her diving into the things that she wants to dive into. So that's the answer to that question, Atari. So, hey, Kimberly, I'm looking at, yes, I need to remember to look back at my computer to see your comments. Chrissy, I love that you were able to surrender. Yeah, and it took some time, Chrissy. Let me not sit up here and be like, she told me and I honored it immediately. And Chris and I were like, yes. We're like, what? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Blah, blah, blah. That definitely took quite some time for us to get there. So I encourage you too, if you have any level of curiosity, and not just you, Chrissy, all of us, we have some level of curiosity around self-directed education, because we know that conventional schooling isn't working, because most of us know that, then give yourself the opportunity to explore. Be okay with being doubtful. Be okay with the typical questions like, what about math? What about college? And I'm going to address those too. All right. Because you get there over time as you continue to peel back the layers. It's not a 1 week, 1 month, 1 year thing. And that process of getting there is often referred to as deschooling. And honey, it's been almost 7 years and we're still deschooling. All right. So Janita Castro, the homie, who is also on my podcast, I'll tell you a little bit about my Unschooling Focus podcast in a little bit. But Janita had a question. She said, what does unschooling look like in the teen years for Black children? Is it different than white children? Since we are held to a different set of standards, specifically in the U.S., will our children be negatively looked at as lazy or uneducated? Thank you, Janita. I appreciate that you brought that question up. One of the things for me, I do not shy away from the discussion around race and racism. I'm one of those people who identify as blackity black, and it's really important to me that that I live my politics, and unschooling is a part of how we do that. So I love that question, Janita, because we need to be comfortable. We need to get comfortable being uncomfortable with these questions about race and our families. So I do think that it is different specifically for Black children. Obviously, I hope this is obvious, that obviously we don't have the same access to freedom in terms of the ability to explore. I'll give you an example. When we talk about unschooling, right? We say that learning isn't inside a classroom. Learning is in here. It's also in our communities, our environments, those sort of spaces. But if you have a Black son or a Black daughter who's 13, 14, walking around the neighborhood, you have very different concerns than, say, your white friend who has a child of the same age walking around the neighborhood. Because we don't feel sure that, nor should we, that the people who are in power to serve and protect are there to serve and protect us. They're there instead to serve and protect order, and also sometimes to carry out objectives that are not connected to humanity and love and respect and appreciation. Not even love, just appreciation, value, respect, humanity. We have these challenges. And so for us, a lot of the unschooling work is and has been deschooling our daughters, because they were in school and they are members of our general society, right? Deschooling us and them from these ideas that we have the same privileges, because we don't. And this isn't a matter of, I don't know if y'all can hear my kitten playing in the background. We don't have those same freedoms. We have very different concerns. So our children need to understand that too, as they are educating themselves. A part of what we do as parents, a part of our role as parents, is to bring to them the awareness of how this society is set up, what some of the common broken narratives are around people of color, and how to navigate those spaces. So, for example, as I mentioned, Ellie and Sage are in an Agile Learning Center now, and Janita's, two of Janita's little ones, I think, were in an Agile Learning Center in North Carolina. So one of the things that they're going to do, they move to a new space, and the older children are going to have sort of like these roaming privileges where they're not just in the center. They're going to be, say there's a coffee shop like a block down. There's a library close by. There are all of these things close by. And in groups, we as the parents are completely okay with our children exploring that space, because we don't want them to necessarily sit in that space all day. Life is happening. Opportunities are happening to learn. So they're going to be meeting with the police officers of that area, so that those officers, when they're doing their thing and they see any of our children, they're not thinking that there's a truancy issue, right? So they reached out to us, the facilitators, Julia and Anthony of that particular Agile Learning Center, and they said, look, we're going to be talking to the police about the children who will be kind of exploring the area. We want to introduce them officially. We want to go into the police station and all of that. But Julia remembered that Chris was having a conversation with another parent, another Black parent, about police, right? And she said, well, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving out the specific aspects that come with being a Black child talking to police officers in the space. And I like that she did that. But Chris and I were also like, nah, we don't need you to do that part. We will talk as Black people, we will talk to our Black children about that aspect of police and policing and what that has meant historically in this country, what it means now in this country, what to say, what not to say, what are your rights as a young person or as a human, all of these things that need to happen. And so we expose our daughters to that. As unschoolers, it's not a matter of like, do you want to learn about this? And then if they say no, we don't do it. They are going to learn about it in that, in the context of Blackness. And then from there, we just continue to explore, but now they'll have that base. You understand? They'll have that knowledge instead of sitting in a classroom where they're saying, police officers are wonderful and da-da-da-da, without the reality of the context that we're in. So, Janita, I do think that we have a deeper sense of obligation and necessity to talk about the social context for our Black children as a matter of safety, as a matter of realistic expectations, as a matter of even dialogue, what to say and what not to say, and what your rights are and how you feel safe. So yes, I think it is different for us. Okay. Cool. So, and then another question is from Ashley. And I love this one. I get this one all the time. It's about college. From Ashley, she says, how does unschooling work for the future in applying for colleges, such as a need for transcripts, testing scores from the SAT and the ACTs? I got something for you, Ashley. So, Antonio Buehler, he wrote a brilliant piece. He runs, it's called Abrome. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Abrome. And I'll list it in the comments when we're done. He wrote a really brilliant piece, and it's about, let me tell you the actual title. College admissions for alternative schooled, homeschooled, and unschooled applicants. And it's at abrome.com, Abrome. Really, really detailed. And he essentially just breaks down, as many other people have. If you Google unschooling in college or unschoolers getting into college, you'll find plenty resources. But what I really love about how he framed it, how Antonio framed it, he talks about the fact that there are advantages to being an unconventional learner. So one thing is that you're going to be applying to these schools usually of your own volition, not pressure from the people around you. And you're looking at the schools not from the space of like, oh, this school will look good when I'm applying for jobs, or this school looks good on my resume, or going to this school will make me look good. Instead of taking that approach, unschoolers and unconventional schoolers in general tend to look at it like, how will this benefit me? how can I bring who I am fully? Because unconventional schoolers tend to have a better understanding of themselves. You know, they've had time to explore and understand aspects of themselves. And so they know that they're bringing that whole self into an environment. And it's sort of like they're interviewing schools as opposed to like, I hope I get in because this is going to make me better. It's like, no, let me see if this in fact will make me better. Let me interview this school. If I know that there's certain schools I want to go to as an unschooler, for example, I have years of time to practice writing the perfect essay for them, to test over and over again, because you don't even need a high school diploma to get into college. You need to test in. So, you know, you get to practice all these tests, oftentimes without the timing restriction at first or the pressure of pre-testing. You know, when you're in a traditional school, people are looking at your test scores from way back then, and they're determining how you see yourself and whether you feel successful and whether you're competing with your classmates. As unschoolers, we don't have to deal with any of that. We're focused on the progress that we want to see and the goals that we've set for ourselves. So it's not competing against anyone. It's doing the very best we can in that space. So that article, Antonio put it in much more detail, so I'm going to put a link to that. But essentially, you test in, right? Just like you would if you were in a traditional school, and you have plenty of time to prepare. Also, I'm going to give you a link. I have so many good resources for y'all. I'm also going to give you a link to a video that was posted on Growing Minds. Zakia, and Ahmed run a site called Growing Minds, and there's a YouTube page with videos from their conference, the Reimagine Learning Conference. And there are two girls there, two young girls young women now, and one of them is in college and the other has her own business. She's an entrepreneur, successful baking business, I believe. And they talk about, especially Tarsha, the one who's in college, she talks about how being an unschooler really benefited her, as now she's pursuing law and she's at the top of her class. At the time of the recording of the video, she's at the top of her class, just thriving in the space because she was so clear on what she wanted to do in college and why that particular college and that particular major was perfect for her. Whereas a lot of us who came from a traditional environment like myself, we changed majors a couple of times because we were like, I'm in college. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Now what? You know, that sort of thing is so normal for us. Or we graduate college and we're like, I graduated from college. I did what I was supposed to do. Now what? A lot of times untraditional educators or untraditional learners they don't have that obstacle because they've had so much time to get really clear themselves, and also through resources around them, human resources, digital resources, to get really clear on what they want to do and what school they want to go to, and if they even need to go to school, and then they just pursue it from that space. All right. Man, the time is like flying by, and I have like 8,000 other things that I want to talk to y'all about. So let's see. Question. Okay, Antonia had a couple of questions that I wanted to address as well. So can you walk listeners through how self-directed education looks when your kids are like tweens to teens? I was wondering in particular, how do you apply? Okay. All right. So essentially, Antonia wants to know what the day-to-day looks like. And I've addressed a little bit of that. Well, not really. Let me tell you what it looks like for us. And I do have to say, unschoolers, you know, we are not a monolith, just like any other group of people. It's going to vary. And that's what's really beautiful about self-directed education. You get to tailor it to what you want, the same way that you couldn't walk into a seamstress or a tailor and they just look at you and say, okay, this is exactly what you need. They need to measure, they need to cut, they need to try this. You may gain a little weight, you may lose a little weight. Things are going to change, things are going to pivot. That's natural, that's normal, and that's what's going to make the best fit. Right? It's the very same thing with unschooling. So, how it looks for my family now, and my daughters are 13 and 11. And right now, as we're in Atlanta, we're location independent. So that just means that we live in different cities. We use a lot of home sharing options like Airbnb, and we just travel because we think that that really enhances the learning experience for all four of us, not just for the girls, when you can be in different spaces, be around different people, smell different smells and all of that, learn different languages. So right now we're back in Atlanta because my mom and them is here and Chris's parents are here, and family is such an integral part of how we get on, you know, as people. But right now, as we're based in Atlanta, it looks for our daughters today like waking up at around 8 o'clock, going into the Agile Learning Center from 9 to about 3. They come home, they work on whatever it is that they want to work on. Sometimes we might go somewhere. Sometimes they might be sort of typical teen, tweenie, want to be in their room or watching whatever they want to watch. Or Sage, our youngest, is really into digital art, costume design, these sort of things, baking. So she might be like, oh, I saw this recipe for vegan blueberry muffins. I want to try them. Okay, let's stop off at the supermarket and pick up these things. She doesn't need us in the mix. I'm like, okay, let me know if something happens. That's what it looks like. Marley may say, okay, I'm going to do dance practice from 3 to 4:30. And then I'm going to veg out and watch a few things on YouTube for a couple of hours. And then there's this space that I want to check out because I think I want to put this thing together. It really just depends. When people ask that question, I know that it's from a framework of structure because we've been groomed to think that we as the adults need to create the structure so that learning can happen. But in unschooling, it's the opposite. We as the adults can't know how learning happens for our children until we observe and then we follow their lead. So it doesn't mean that we don't introduce them to things. Again, coming from the Black-centered space, there are plenty of things historically and currently that we expose our daughters to. We just don't shove it down their throats. So we don't say, if we tell them something that's happening and they're like, okay, then we say, okay, you feel like that's not relevant. Why? And then we might have a conversation about that. Or if they say, I don't want to talk about it at all, we actually let it go. Because it's a matter of respecting where they are and who they are and still honoring the needs that we have too. And that's a dance. That's something that we can't really talk about in detail in a few minutes. But that's basically the structure of the day depends on the needs of the child and what's happening in the environment. So if I'm super busy that day with a project and Marley wants to go check out a space, if I'm not available for that, then I say so. Just as I would with any other like business partner or somebody that I'm working on something with. We really just try to treat each other like people with our own individual needs and goals who live and love together and who support each other. So the structure of the day is going to be determined by what the needs are of the four of us for that day and the goals for that day and all of those things. All right. Let's see. I would love to hear, this one is from Christina. I would love to hear your thoughts on delayed academics. Some parents don't start core subjects until 7 years old. What are your thoughts on that? Because we are not focused on teaching our children or giving them information that we think they're gonna need. That doesn't happen in the typical way. I don't see the point of curricula at all unless a child asks for it or unless you see that it's aligned with exactly what they're into at the moment. And then you introduce it to them and they're fully receptive to it. So I guess it would be good to delay it because the more time you give a child to explore themselves and to do what naturally, biologically happens for us. Curiosity is innate. Any child, I challenge you to tell me 2 children who, if you just said, okay, come here and sit with me, that they would just sit with you the entire time and not want to do anything, not want to pick something up, not want to learn about something, not want to follow their own interests. That's organic. So the more time that you give a child to learn how to be comfortable with that exploration and how to turn that exploration into little projects that they do, essentially play, the more time you give them, the better. But the problem becomes that you give them this time and space, and then you're like, all right, now based on society, I need you to learn these things. Then you just put this abrupt stop to who they're becoming and how they're learning. And then we punish them because they rebel, quote unquote, by not participating or not wanting to participate or all of these different things. So I guess, Christina, the short answer is yes, delay it. Delay it as long as possible. Delay it forever. And instead start looking at some resources for better understanding how learning actually happens and how to facilitate that ongoing curiosity, that lifelong learning in children. Okay? Let's see. Do you need a curriculum? That was another question from Antonia. I think I touched on that. No, you don't. You absolutely don't. unless your child wants one, or unless you come across one, once again, that may be super interesting to your child and you offer it to them to say, hey, do you want to run through some of this? You can do that, okay? Okay, another question is, what are the basic tenets of unschooling? I feel like I'm touching on that a little bit as we talk, so let me look back at some of your questions. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Georgia. I'm a single working mom. Is unschooling an option? That's such a great question. Yes, it is. Good. Okay, this is a good segue from my podcast. It's called Fear of the Free Child, and I'll put a link to it in here. We have single mothers on the podcast who talk about how it looks for them. Yes, you can do it, because unschooling is not, it's not this thing that only happens if you're able to dedicate all of your time, if you're a homemaker, and so you're able to dedicate all of your time to observing and facilitating learning for your children, and therefore you can be an unschooler. That's a common myth. And I do have a piece with a lot of the common myths about unschooling, and that's one of them. What you're doing is you're not just educating, you're raising free people. Let me show you my shirt again. You're raising free people. So a part of that is that they need to have an understanding of who and how they are. And you, as a single mother, you can do that in collaborative spaces. Now, admittedly, that's been a challenge for a lot of families, because we are still, generally as society, we are still so indoctrinated into the idea that school is, particularly as Black folks, that school is where you go to get learning. So all of the resources are poured into schools, but we don't have spaces where we can actually explore learning and develop our own curricula, because some of us want that, and have it be child-centered in terms of it being, or learner-centered in terms of it being a result of something that emerges organically from the group of people. But how you do it, some ways of how you can actually do it, is that you can do homeschooling co-ops. Mahogany Way Mama. Oh, I need to, man, y'all just need to listen to the podcast, because Darcel over at Mahogany Way Mama, she has, she talks about how homeschooling co-ops have been great for her daughters and her son. And, the ways that the thing about homeschooling co-ops is that some of them, again, like the one that's here, some of them will be curriculum centered, but oftentimes they're just activity centered, where you can be there, you can partner up with other parents to say, look, I have to go to work from this time to this time. Can I drop my child off by you? And then I'll pick them up. And then on Saturdays, maybe I, as the working parent, the traditional working parent, might take that person's kid and we do some things together on Saturdays or Sundays. It's collaborative. Or these learning center spaces like what my daughters are in. I know a friend of mine, Monique, who's a recent unschooler. Her son is there. She's a single mom. Her son also has some health challenges. So she's in that space where we can carpool. I can pick up Farrell one day, or Chris can pick up Farrell, or she picks up the girls another day. It's about getting in a sense of community with the people around you. And so sometimes that means you can't live where you live. And that's the reality. If you're in an area where this is such a common thing that I get, oh my God, there aren't very many Black families, or I go to these spaces and the things that they're talking about, the things that they're into, they're not connected with me and mine. Listen, I'm not saying that it's always easy, but we got to be comfortable with getting uncomfortable. So if you live in a space that doesn't offer you, or a city that isn't offering you what you need, you got to be willing to figure out either how to create it, co-create it, or move. Period. Because at the end of the day, the life, what you want to do with your day, what you want to do with your time, you do have some control over that. We're not like perpetual victims of the system. So this is why this is empowering, because it says, here's what the walk needs to feel like for me. Or I don't know what it needs to feel like, but I know what doesn't feel good. I know that my child is doing horribly in school. And I'm not willing to blame my child for that. I'm willing to look at all of the factors and see what's going on. When you start peeling back those layers, I think that you feel discouraged at first, but then you also feel empowered, hopefully, to do something about it. And a part of how we do something about it is by getting together, finding ways to create community. And community could just mean you and one other person, one other family, and which can branch out into larger things. So, yes, you can absolutely do it. Listen to the podcast, listen to some episodes with some single parents, Google that. single parent unschooling, because there are many articles out there, personal narratives of people who are doing it successfully, okay? All right, I'm trying to watch the time. Boom. Oh, man. Hey, Kimberly, thank you. Love the podcast. I love yours, too. Let's see. So here's a comment. Dava, pardon me if I'm saying your name wrong. Do you believe that all children can learn and thrive equally well in an unschooling environment? I fear that as they become teens, some kids won't choose to engage with certain topics or subject areas. I'm pretty sure I would have never chosen to learn algebra if given the choice, but I want to believe otherwise. Please poke holes in my limited expectations. I love that. I have essays upon essays that poke all the holes in that. Because a part of that, Dava, I'm going to stick with Dava, and if it's wrong, tell me. DAVA. So Dava, a part of that is that you said, I fear that as they become teens, some kids won't choose to engage with certain topics or subjects. So that's the first hole I want to poke. Why do they need to engage with that topic? You gave the example of algebra. So what if they don't engage in algebra? I engaged in algebra for several years. Ask me something about algebra. Right? Because this would be my answer. I don't know. And I spent years engaging. We have ideas of what needs to happen for a checklist of learning, but those ideas are not true. They're just based on what we've experienced, right? So I was talking with someone yesterday, another unschooling-minded person, Scott Speed, and we were talking about the idea of what's been normalized versus the reality of something. So there's a sense of normalcy that says these are the subjects that kids need to learn. And I had them too, Dava, like I feel you. These fears of I was like, what if they don't learn math, or I'm not going to be able to teach them science? But if that's something that's of interest to them, trust and believe that they are going to engage, especially as they get older, Dava, and they're going to learn these things. I'll give you an example, and I've given this one a bazillion times. Language studies. So our daughters, they speak a few different languages, none of which Chris nor I speak. And they started going down that road as a result of an interest of theirs, which was, anime, right? The Japanese cartooning thing, anime, and then manga, which is the written version of it. So books, novels, those sort of things that focus on these aspects of, Japanese animated culture. So as a result of going down that path, they started to look at languages because they wanted to learn things in their native languages. They started to look at the flags of different countries and how the different countries, their history together economically, socially. So they started looking at, if we want to use schoolishness, history and economics and geography and language arts and language studies, art history. We can checklist it, or we can look at the whole thing to say, wow, my kid is 13 and they are teaching me so much about the world, about what countries are where and which ones used to be together and how. And I went to school. I went to college too. And I did well. I was an A student pretty much the entire way through. And I still can't tell you a lot of the things that my daughters and a lot of other unconventional learners can tell you about because they have the opportunity to dive into that space. Dava, most people are not willing to just stop at one place when they start to get curious. Curiosity leads you down a path, and none of these things are in a vacuum. So the minute you decide, if a child decides that they're interested in art, there are so many other topics that are connected to art, and they're going to arrive at those things themselves. Okay. And again, I'm going to put some resources here to continue to poke holes in that because I'm good at that. I like disrupting the ideas that we believe. Is it too late to introduce unschooling to a teenager? Absolutely not. I think it's never too late, actually, to start unschooling, because unschooling it's not a subject matter. You know what I mean? It's not a topic that you learn in school. It's a philosophy. It's an approach to life that also includes, inevitably, how you learn. Yeah. Oh, you need that shirt? Yes, I'm put it in the shop. So no, I don't think that it's too late. Just like deschooling, it's never too late. Let me say this, especially now. I think now, particularly in the U.S., and the U.S. influences so many other places, now is such a great time to start unschooling, because there's so many things around us, so many veils, so many masks that have been taken off, so many curtains that have been pulled back, because the person who's at the helm here is like, yo, I'm not hiding. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. So it's forcing a lot of us to get out of our little comfortable, safe shells, hiding behind our money or hiding behind whatever social status we have, to face the real. And unschooling is all about facing the real and then defining yourself inside of that space. How can I be myself wherever I am? How can I bring my meanness into spaces that help me to build upon and support the communities that I believe in or want to be part of? And unschooling helps you to do that sort of work, because it helps you to face your truths. It helps you to decolonize, which a lot of this comes from that colonized mindset, to decolonize how you see yourself. And then it looks at learning. You know, I like to say that unschooling tends to start out as being a solution to coercive education, or education that isn't working. My child isn't doing well in school, or my child isn't learning anything about us in school, or whatever these things are. It tends to start out like that. But then as you go further into it, you realize that learning is not just something that happens with subject matter. There's this whole person. Your child isn't just a student. Your child is a person. You are a person. And what are all of the things that comprise you? What are the things that are of interest to you? What are the things that piss you off? What are the things that get you riled up in a good way and a bad way? And how can you start navigating those spaces? That's what unschooling is about. Confident autonomy, confident navigation of the spaces and environments that you're a part of, and doing that in a way that is centered on growing yourself, growing the communities that you think need to be growing, pushing back against oppression, pushing back against these anti-liberatory practices that try to define you, and that have you seeking external validation. All of these things are faced in unschooling. And it's not that they're necessarily solved, but of course, right, is it Baldwin that said you can't face something, you can't change something until you face it? So unschooling forces you to face those things, because as a parent, you start dealing with your child. And that's a question that somebody had too, about what your role is as a parent. Dude, like 95%, maybe more, of unschooling is facing your own stuff as a parent. Why do I feel the need to control my child? Why do I feel like sending them off, outsourcing them to this entity, particularly as people of color, that has consistently showed me that it doesn't value me or mine? Why do I still feel like that's the way for me to go? What is my baggage around how I see education as a means of giving my child a life that I didn't have, or a life that's better than the one that I had? How can I look deeper into those assumptions? And then as you start to do that, then that depth, waking up to those realities of sort of deschooling yourself from what you've been told to really exploring it, then that's going to cause you to back up some and to explore your child in a way that allows you to actually support them in their learning journey. So, that's what it looks like in our space. Okay, cool. Hey, Shivani. Yes, another unschooler. Yes. Love it, love it, love it. Can you describe what deschooling look like for your family? Passes the offering plate, church. Yes. That's even another one. Oh my gosh, Chrissy, that comes up. Even the idea of religion, and I won't go too deep in here. All of these different things that we as children, because we're all, right, children, we as adults, we were all children once. There are a lot of things that were just placed on us. And as you start to unschool and deschool and decolonize and shed and all of that, you really just start to find out that, you know what, actually, I'm cool. I don't feel like I need this at this stage in my journey, or I totally need this. So it can either be like in the space of religion, you may reject it altogether, or you might embrace it from a space that now deeply feels connected to who you are and not just what you've been taught. Okay. And I'll answer this one and then we'll wrap. Let's see. Can you describe what deschooling looks like? Okay, great. Deschooling looks a lot like what I just said, like just what I said just now, facing a lot of the things that you have believed, and then being willing to go down the road to say, okay, if this doesn't feel good, or if this information now tells me, I'm trying to think of a literal example so that I can offer you some more clarity. Okay, the example of math, that's an easy one, right? I was really, really nervous about, and so was Chris, about the idea that if we took the girls out of school, that they wouldn't get really good at math, or how would they learn certain sciences and that sort of thing. So then, as I just said to Dava, then we started to question the deschooling process looked like, okay, so what if they didn't learn advanced math? I learned advanced math, or did I? No, I was just exposed to it. Okay, so how else is math showing up? What is math about? What is the point of it? So they need to be comfortable with numbers. They need to be able to sort of like quickly assess, be confident in doing like basic addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. So we then, instead of being like, okay, if we weren't using a curriculum, since Marley was so resistant to it at first, and now she likes curricula, that's hilarious. Then how else could we deal with the results of math instead of focusing on the thing, math itself? So then we recognize the ways that math shows up all over the world, the way that money math is a priority and how you can't really avoid that, especially if you're sending your child to the store or you're giving them the budget to say, this is how much money we have, go get these things, and then, go to the register and see what's up. We did that a lot when the girls were younger. There are all these different ways for you to actually explore and maybe expose your children to, if you want to, a lot of different subjects, but in real world settings. So deschooling looks a lot like recognizing how much schoolishness is showing up and then saying, okay, if these things never made sense to me, even going to college because you feel like you should, not because you want to, or the things that you learn in high school or middle school, a lot of us know that those things didn't make sense to us. So a lot of deschooling looks like, okay, I'm willing to accept and face that there are things that didn't make sense to me growing up that I'm now forcing my child to do. What's up with that? That's like deschooling A. That's the first letter. That's the first thing that you do. What's up with that? Why am I doing that anyway if I know that it didn't work for me? It didn't work for me. Does that automatically mean that it won't work for my child? No. But does it mean that since it didn't work for me, that I should question it and that maybe my child should be involved in the exploration of this thing so we can find something that reaches them and not just something that checks off the list of me exposing my child to this? That's what deschooling looks like. And there are a lot of resources around that. I know Zakia has a deschooling reading list, and I'll put that in the comments after too, so that you can see sort of what deschooling is looking like for different people, because it looks like different things. For our family, it was a lot of decolonization because we come from this traditional British Caribbean background as Jamaicans, where there's, these ideas of what learning looks like and how you present yourself and how children should be, certain phrases that we have back home, like bend the tree while it's young. Like that's when you get to mold them when they're young and you turn them into, the right type of people, challenging those things and being like, I don't know what the hell the right type of person is. I'm just discovering myself in my 30s. If I was honest about that, how would my life be different? How would my practice be different? How would my relationship with my child be different? Would I still be hitting them since I know what that felt like for me growing up? Would I still be forcing them to do these things? That's what deschooling is. It's facing a lot of your own baggage and being like, am I perpetuating this and why? And can I be compassionate with myself and respectful to my child? Because I do feel very much, y'all, like homeschooling, in general, and then when we talk about specifically not the homeschooling that mimics school, but the one where you're saying you're taking them out of the system and doing all of these different exploratory things to learn them, for me, that's a civil rights issue because we treat children like less than. And we know growing up how problematic that is. And we also, I think we do society an injustice by doing that because we assume that we have the right answers instead of creating space for those answers and multiple solutions, because there are many of them, to emerge, which is why, as we wrap, there are two spaces that I really I encourage y'all to check out. The Alliance for Self-Directed Education. I'm an organizer with that team. I stand fully behind what's happening there. It's self-directed.org. There are a lot of resources there to help you just really unpack and navigate these spaces of like, damn, I'm seeing what's not working, but I don't know what is. I don't know how to design something different. the Alliance, we are really designed to, and we came together to create space for people to explore that and to have resources around that and to normalize this anti-coercive learning option. So that's a great space. We have a magazine called Tipping Points that has personal narratives, articles from people in their own voice around how self-directed education is showing up for them. I know a lot of us are interested in looking at it from the perspective of a person of color. That is definitely what is most important for me. So my podcast, Fear of the Free Child, I'll put the link to it. That's a space where you're going to hear all personal narratives from people of color and also people who support people of color based on where they are, what their learner body looks like. It's right now, there are 49 episodes. We just ended season 2. I'm going to start season 3 in November. Listen to the stories. The podcast alone is going to send you down a rabbit hole of details. Each show notes page has links to articles and essays and contact information for the folks that you hear. There are plenty of resources out there. I want you to feel empowered and excited about this opportunity to raise free people, including yourself. Because, when you oppress, you are also oppressed because it calls for you to do certain things. And y'all, we've got options. We've got options, and self-directed education helps you to explore those. All right. I'm looking back over at the comments. Very nervous about it. I hear you, Jacqueline. Yes. Keep going. All right. Awesome sauce. So that's it, y'all. I think that's the general thing let me look back at my notes to make sure that there isn't something that I am forgetting. So I'm going to put some links in the comment section once again. Tag a friend in this. You can also send me other questions through Twitter or Instagram. I use the 2 hashtags that I use the most are Raising Free People and POC in SDE, as in people of color in self-directed education. All right. And I'll put those in the link as well. One last thing, y'all, because somebody asked about testing. And I know that particularly for our people, this idea of college being the path, the light in the way, that's a whole nother Facebook Live episode. There's an article that I want you to read, and I'm going to put the link in there, but it is called Why the Academic Achievement Gap is a Racist Idea. It's written by Ibram X. Kendi, and it's on the African American Intellectual History Society site. I'm going to put the link in there, but I want y'all to read that. That is what deschooling starts to look like, because so many unschoolers came right out of academia and just didn't want to be a part of the problem anymore. So that's the deal, y'all. I can go on and on till the break of dawn, but I appreciate your time and energy in the space. I appreciate your interest. I am so excited for people to start raising free people and to free ourselves from these oppressive models that end up raising people like Donald Trump, frankly. Because hurt people, and free people. And there are things that we can do starting today to have a more liberatory walk and liberatory practice with the people we love. And unschooling has very much been that for myself and a lot of folks. So thank you for being here. I'm going to hop off, but I'm going to stay on the comments for a few more minutes. Tag a friend in this because the video is going to be live forever, or as long as Facebook exists, so we can continue the conversation. All right? Peace and love. Thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you soon. You can reach me over at AkilahSRichards.com, by the way, or Radical Selfie on all the social needs joints. Peace.